Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Paul Follows, and I'm the leader of Waverley Borough Council here in Surrey. Now, yesterday we released details of how we intend to assist several Afghan families, refugees fleeing their country to avoid an almost inevitable fate of persecution, violence, and perhaps even death. Many have served with our armed forces as part of the UK involvement in Afghanistan over the last 20 years too. Now, both Council and Surrey Live posted details online, and I took part in several discussions on social media over the day too. Now, comments tended to go one of three ways. A good number were very supportive, and I want to thank all the residents that spoke up in that way. Many offered a lot of help too, so thank you. However, there were some that were abusive or actually much worse, and in those cases, I've chosen not to engage. Now, many were also a third category that I do want to specifically engage with here, and those are asking completely legitimate questions of why we can now help and who are we now not helping as a result, and where have we suddenly found housing and money to do that? Now, in reply to those questions, I just want to make my own background clear. I work a full-time job too, as well as being a councillor. I'm also the son of a retired soldier, and I've lived in council housing or on military posts where my father was stationed for most of my youth too. Now, I believe out of a combination of duty, outright shame at their own behaviour, and the threat of increasingly bad press, the government is providing some additional resources. And with those resources, we can procure some additional housing, some of it private. We can bring some housing we have currently out of commission into service sooner, and we can use some of those resources to attempt to integrate and assist those refugee families. But let us be clear, this is not money we can just use for other things. And I do have a general and genuine concern that once the press stops caring about this and paying attention, the government will cut this money in a year or so. Unfortunately, the council has seen this happen before with Syrian refugees too. Now, we do our best at every level to ensure that nobody is homeless in Waverley. We have a duty to house, and we provide all sorts of support to veterans through the Armed Forces Covenant. However, if you know anyone locally in this position who needs that additional support and that additional help, I urge you to refer them to the council or to me directly. But we are a large rural borough, and as much as this sometimes sounds crazy, it can be that sometimes people go unseen by local services and are missed, and which is why I'm asking you to highlight them if you know that they're there. And unfortunately, there are also some that need help and have refused it. But my broader point is this: the government has cut funding to local government and local services now for years, and clearly to the point that division in our community on some of these subjects is pretty rife, particularly on social media. Now, I think this is through a deliberate practice of only supporting significant corporate interests, their donors, developers, and dare I say it, their friends and colleagues too. And they've done that at the expense of those people who are most in need and have willfully neglected large sectors of society who are increasingly dire economic and social need. And social housing, council housing, is also becoming increasingly scarce. Partly this is because we must compete against wealthy private developers for the land to build them on. And at the same time, the government makes it harder for us to borrow funds to deliver that sort of housing at all. Government planning rules allow developers to evade their affordable and social housing commitments frequently. And when we stand up to this, a government planning inspector will often overturn it anyway. And this is before you get into the usual stuff about how much of a joke affordable housing really is as a concept, when it's often considered to be 80% of market rent in somewhere like Waverley. It's absolutely mad. And I know we've discussed this before. As evidenced by many of the comments yesterday, the government has successfully got to the point where all of these groups in need seem to fight each other for those scarce resources instead of doing what I think they need to do, which is taking the government that's denying them those resources to task. We're a wealthy nation, but with the wrong priorities for how that wealth is distributed and how it's spent. I'm a council leader, and I take that responsibility very seriously, and I take responsibility too for the council's actions here in Waverley, and I will do all I can to ensure that we help as many people as we can. And I stress that means both local people and those from outside needing urgent aid in situations like this. That's what we're here for and what we want to do, but we cannot, as a society and as a local community, continue down this us versus them mentality in all things without addressing the government and their role in this. We've seen how good we can all be during the pandemic. We've seen how wonderful support has been and how effective it's been. We can and should do this differently. Things need to change at the national level, and they must change if we're really going to start making a dent and really helping people. But for now, thank you for listening. And if you've got any questions or comments, please do leave them in the box below or contact me on my usual channels. Thank you.